Hi, my name is Ty Landrum, and I would like to speak with you today about two patterns of movement which are of paramount importance to hatha yoga. Hatha yoga is a tradition of yoga that works physiologically with the body to help induce what we might call meditative states of consciousness. So the two patterns that I want to speak with you about are called Prana and Apana. These two movements are responsible for inhalation and exhalation in the body, along with many other things. But we can feel the prana pattern physiologically when we inhale as a sort of upward and outward movement that has its center point or its seed point right at the heart, right at the center of the chest. So you can feel when you draw a breath deeply in, you can feel your rib cage expand and the collarbones roll back, and the whole rib cage tilts a little bit. You tend to sort of sit up taller as you inhale, and there's a sort of rising sensation through the body that's associated with that. Physiologically, if you just sort of allow the inhale pattern to move the spine freely, you'll feel that it also accentuates the curve of the lumbar spine. So as you draw the breath in, the lower back gets more concave and the pubic bone drops. The tailbone, or the very tip of the tailbone, the coccyx, lifts a little bit. So, like that. The collarbones roll back, the arms almost want to lift. And there's a sort of sensation of rising and reaching outward. And you'll also feel that if you take sort of pranic expression with the body, there's a sense of being inspired, to use an apropos term, a sense of the attention being sort of drawn up, a sense of receptivity, of openness, an ability to see things from multiple perspectives. And in the context of the mind, prana is responsible for the diversification of thought, so the movement from one thought form into many others. Prana has this sort of upward and outward branching movement that is reflected in the movement of thought when we, for example, use imagination to tease out the consequences of a particular thought that we're having, or when one thought simply reminds us of some other things, or even when we're just drawing rational consequences from one thought to another. All of these are movements of prana in the mind. The opposite energy is called apana, and it has its seed point down in the pelvic floor. And apana has a sort of inward contractive movement. So the sensation that you feel when you exhale, which is an apanic movement, is one of sort of gathering in and reaching down into the pelvic floor, which, after all, naturally contracts every time you exhale. So in speaking of the pelvic floor, we're speaking of the sort of complex diaphragm of muscles that connects the pubic bone with the end of the tailbone, or coccyx, and the two sitting bones. So especially these two bands of muscle called the pubiococcygeal muscles naturally contract every time you exhale, and there's sort of a sense of sensation drawing down into that seed point that you can feel quite viscerally. When you exhale, there's a sense of the heart sort of dropping and the collarbones rolling forward and the rib cage tilting forward like this, and the back actually rounds, and we become more in a flexion pattern. And this pattern has a sense of, if you sort of yield to it, it has a sense of solidity and of groundedness and rootedness. But if the apana pattern is not balanced by its opposite, then it tends toward rigidity. It tends toward stubbornness, or even at the extreme end, it towards sort of dogmatism and fundamentalism. Mentally, apana is responsible for letting things go. So it's responsible for clearing the mind, or reducing the multiplicity of thought forms from many back down to one. So apana is at play whenever we make decisions. It's at play whenever we simply make up our minds about what it is that we think about something, or what it is even that we're feeling on a sensory level in the present moment. And it's also at play when we simply let go of something that is burdening us, or something that we're carrying with us that no longer serves us. These are movements of apana. The movement of prana is sometimes likened to the sort of upward and outward reaching branches of a tree, and apana is likened to the sort of downward and outward movements of the roots of a tree. And this image is meant to remind us that these two patterns can only come into their natural fullness when they're supported by their opposite, because of course the branches of a tree can only reach out as far as the roots go down and spread. In hatha yoga, what we try to do is to work with these two basic energies to sort of liberate them first and foremost, to allow them to come into their natural fullness both in our bodies and our minds by sort of removing the various psychical and physiological obstructions to those movements, and then to actually start to feel the way that prana and apana depend on one another, start to feel how they interpenetrate. And when we bring these energies into balance, we can actually start to sort of press them together. This is the fundamental mudra of hatha yoga. It's the mudra of pressing together the creative and dissolutive energies in the body. So when prana and apana really start to sort of expand and we start to press them together, then the creative movement of thought and the dissolving movement of thought start to simultaneously arise. And so our thoughts are dissolving just as soon as they're appearing. And so instead of focusing our attention on particular currents of thought and being distracted away from the present moment, we simply allow these sensation patterns to unfold naturally without the obstruction of our ideas about what's actually relevant or what's actually going on. And the effect is that we start paying closer attention to what really is going on by sort of opening that field of attention to this sort of vast array of different sensations, thoughts, memories that are sort of flowing through our field of experience at any given moment, which we ordinarily sort of suppress in order to hang on to our ideas about what really matters. So this state of mind in which we are completely open to all of the various things that we're feeling, thinking, remembering at any given moment, and allowing those things to simply come to the surface of our consciousness and unfold and disappear is a meditative state. It's the sort of suspension of the ordinary constricting conceptual activity, which in classical yoga is called chittavritti nirodha. And through the practice of hatha yoga, by working with prana and apana, we create this mudra that allows us to bring about chittavritti nirodha by these very sort of visceral means. The techniques of hatha yoga, especially on the level of physiological alignment, which is a good place to start, bring these two movements together. There's, in Surya Namaskar, we oscillate between movements which are upward and outward and expansive, and movements which are downward and inward and contractive. And what we try to do is to sort of feel the essence of the opposite movement as we give expression to each of these movements. So physiologically, what we start to do is press the apana pattern, or the pattern of contraction and rootedness, into the inhale movements, so that instead of just arching and taking the energy all the way up, we drop the energy down and stay connected with the root in the pelvic floor, with the lower half of the body, with the feet, and ultimately with the physical earth. And as we come down and we contract, we try to keep the heart open. We try to stay receptive even as we're drawing in and down. So the place to start to work with these two basic energies is Surya Namaskar. And because Surya Namaskar just is an oscillation between these two patterns, and the sort of best place to start is simply to feel these two energies of expansion and contraction moving within us, and then to start to sort of feel how those two energies are present inside one another. So starting to feel ourselves sort of rooting down as we're inhaling and drawing up, feeling ourselves spreading and opening even as we're drawing down. And through that basic way of working with Prana and Apana, many other very interesting things start to happen. Thank you very much.